Hello and welcome to the Door 14 Hockey Podcast. I'm your host Marty alongside John,
Hello.
Aaron,
Hey,
and tonight we have special guest from Banners on the Wall. Anthony, how are you doing?
Where am I? This doesn't look like Basingstoke.
You've joined us. You came from Basingstoke and you're joining us here in Belfast. Even
Belfast in Scotland.
Belfast via Fife, yeah.
Five. Yeah, exactly.
I've fallen
for
through
anybody
the forbidden
who,
door from the NIHL into the Elite League.
and you're very welcome, and we will get to that. Don't you worry. For anybody who is stumbling upon our live stream, because we are live right now on Facebook, Twitter, sorry, and YouTube. You're very welcome if you've stumbled upon us. If you're a regular listener to the podcast, which is our traditional method of communication, you will be listening to us on Friday the 25th, which means we are on the first pre-season game of the year for some of us here in Belfast. We are not affiliated with any team, we should say, but we do have teal tinted specs for some of us, anyway, three of us, not Anthony, and we are looking forward to the first pre-season game of the year. So some excitement tonight. Anyway, we're on the eve of hockey. John, let's go to you first. How are you doing?
Finally, after the last 2 weeks of my daughter bringing a bug back from nursery, absolutely fine. Thankfully, the last 2 weeks of my life could quite happily have just disappeared, and I'd be happy to get to this point. So yes, long story short, I'm doing very good, thank you.
Good. And Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm similar to John, although it wasn't from a nursery. I caught some sort of bug and brought it home and shared it with my family. I brought a bug home from London. It's all about sharing, but on the mend. And do you know what? Absolutely excited, not only for the hockey, but hearing that theme tune again. I don't know if you saw me, Marty. I was jamming away there when that music was playing.
I could. We in the admin section, we can see the little squares at the bottom, and I can see he's dancing away, which is always great. And I also found this week, from our last stream, I also found the comment section and the little admin button. So hopefully we'll be able to press buttons in the correct order today, which would be great. And last but not least, Anthony, thank you for joining us on this week's podcast. We will be coming to you and bowing down to your knowledge in a few minutes' time. But tell us a bit about yourself. You've been on the podcast before. I think we had you on once before as a pre-recorded section on our podcast itself, maybe a couple of years back. I think we were talking at the time about.
It was a while ago now. It was a little while.
Yeah, I think we chatted at the time about. I remember I think John did the interview, and I think we were talking at the time about the NIHL's system about points, around penalties and stuff. I think we were talking about at that point, if I remember correctly. But you're very welcome to this week's podcast. How are you doing? Any bugs there on your side in Basingstoke?
Well, I'm actually based in Southampton, so I'm even further south than that. I'm literally, if I walk too far in one direction, I'm hitting the water. No, I'm good, gentlemen. Thank you. It's very, very different to be on a different show, having done my show last night. For the people not familiar, I'm Anthony Russell. I do a thing called Banners on the Wall. I've done it now for about 12 and a bit years. That started just being focused on the Basingstoke Bison, and now I cover as much as I possibly can of the NIHL structure here in England and Wales, mostly focused on the national, but I cover Division 1 and Division 2, both north and south, as much as I possibly can do for one person.
Yeah, you're a very busy man, between writing some fantastic blogs and pieces for right across the league to you're presenting your own show there. Is it Wednesday nights, isn't it correct? Usually it's regularly Wednesday nights, isn't it, roughly around about there?
Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. Over on the Banners on the Wall YouTube channel. The What's Current stream that's just kind of runs throughout the NIHL season. So, I mean, I'm pretty much into my kind of running now because games are going to start sort of happening. But yeah, Wednesdays at 8 is where it's going to be for the and has been for a while. Started on Periscope.
Oh wow,
that was a trip. YouTube is something I should have swapped to sooner, and it's worked really, really well. We had John on last night, the chap who runs what was EPL rosters is now NIHL rosters, and yeah, it's basically just kind of a bit of coverage of all 5 divisions. We'll touch on every single game that has been played across the NIHL the previous weekend. look forward, look back, or as I've done during this summer, shout at Planet Ice and Tony Smith, apparently. I do a bit of a mishmash of stuff on there, depending on what the situation is at the time.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that, a lot of that stuff. I know John, you had a couple of questions around the whole Steel Dogs stuff, and we'll get into a bit more of that, and we'll get into the famous part that I think we usually give you a brain aneurysm for, which is obviously development and elite league. Is it development? So we'll have a bit of a chat about that as well. I'm sure you're looking forward to it. For anybody who is new around here, though, to our podcast or the stream, Door 14 Hockey is a podcast that focuses on the world of hockey from right across the UK. We split our show into 3 periods, similar to a game of hockey. Period 1 focusing on stories from around the UK. Period 2 usually focuses on NHL, across the water, or just any other general European league, international league. And in period 3 is our general hockey news, which is just covering up any other stories that catch our attention. And we usually finish off our podcast with our overtime segment, which is just questions from you guys, the listeners and the watchers, and we put it to the panel. Guys, if we're happy enough to start, let us get stuck into our period 1 of hockey. As I said, period 1 is a roundup just generally of stories around the UK. Because we have this week as our special guest, we're going to start off this period with I guess kind of a question and answer session, a bit of an educational session around the NIHL and all things NIHL. First off, I suppose just to start off, Annie, we get a lot of, I suppose, listeners and watchers who we bump into at the arena or through chatting to them, whatever outlet that might be. And some of them sometimes are brand new to the world of hockey. Some of them sometimes focus solely on the world of Elite League, and that's okay as well. But if someone is new or doesn't know much about the NIHL, can you give us a quick rundown for a quick lesson for anybody who's maybe new to the NIHL, what that is and where they sit within league structures and stuff in the UK?
No worries. So the NIHL, apart from being a spelling mistake away from the show, is the National Ice Hockey League. That is the structure in England and Wales that sits below the Elite League. It consists of 3 tiers, 5 divisions. So what is effectively the championship of British hockey. The second tier is what's now known as the NIHL National Division. So that is the 11, should be 12, but we'll get into that later, of the teams that sort of sit one level below the Elite League. There is a substantial gap in the number of imported players. The Elite League currently has 15. The National Ice Hockey League National Division allows you to have 3. They can all be on the ice at the same time now. That used to be a rule that you weren't allowed to do that. Now you can do. Below that, you then have Division 1 and you then have Division 2. Division 1 and Division 2 are regionalised. So you have the 1 North, a 1 South, a 2 North, and a 2 South. Please do not ask me when you look at Elite Prospects why there are 8 teams in Division 2 North and 13 teams in Division 2 South. There's just a lot of teams in the South, apparently. A lot of amateur teams in the South who don't want to even things up, apparently. Coventry's in the North, by the way. Did you know this? Don't tell them that. Everybody I tell in Coventry at the Sky Dome says they're not the North, but apparently they are.
See, this is the problem. This is going to be a problem for anybody in Northern Ireland, and this is a problem I have even in my work, in my professional life. I work alongside a regional team right across the whole of the UK, and then when I'm sitting in meetings, sometimes people will go Southwest. They'll go, "Oh, I'm in I'm in like East Midlands. I'm in blah blah," and I'm like, my geography isn't great. So Coventry, I always thought that would be more south, kind of southern and not northern, but that's just me. Anybody else know their geography of England?
I mean, getting into geography with regards to the island of Ireland, I think, is probably something we'll leave for for everybody.
Listen, my knowledge of the geography of England, my knowledge of the geography of England stops, where the Scottish bit of England stops, sort of anything south of Newcastle.
So everything's south for you, is it, John?
Everything's south.
I mean, I'm going to drive to Dumfries in November because with the Solway Sharks having joined the NIHL National Division, I've had a few dealings with Solway before this change of ownership, and I said, when they make it, I was going to come. So I am now committing to driving the entire length of England. So I'm about to learn some geography, or at least where all the service stations are on the M6.
So in terms of the National Ice Hockey League, obviously you've given us a good rundown of kind of how it's structured, how it sits in terms of the teams and everything else. This summer, during the off-season, Elite League fans probably became more aware. Well, I suppose for a couple of different reasons, maybe they became more aware of the NIHL and kind of how, in terms of certain things happen. So one of them would probably be the fact that a well-known Elite League player, quite a player had been batting around the Elite League for quite a while, has recently taken over there in Solway, in Craig Peacock. So that's probably one of the first things, and people kind of like, oh, it was picked up their ears. The second one was obviously this attempted buyover that was kind of stopped, but then came through in the form of the Sheffield Steelers and the Steel Dogs agreement over the summer. What's your take on that in terms of, obviously we know there was stuff going on in relation to, the people standing in the way of saying this can't happen, it shouldn't be happening, and it finally did. I mean, what's your take on an Elite League team? I suppose the Sheffield Steelers almost, buying and owning a NIHL team.
I think it's the difference here between theory and practice, right? And in theory, there's no problem with it. And also, I think the ultimately Ali Cree, who was the owner of the Sheffield Steel Dogs, is within his rights to sell his business to whoever he chooses. From a personal perspective, and there is a difference here, I think, between my personal perspective and the stuff. There's my sort of weird citizen journalist blog, or whatever the hell you want to call me, that I found out and reported. From a personal perspective, I think Tony Smith's words with regard to British players make him initially an unsuitable person to be owning a team in the National Ice Hockey League, especially the National Division, where the majority of our players are British. Now, Tony may well, I'm a person who believes people can change. He may well have had a Saul road to Damascus moment, and he may have seen the light and changed his opinion entirely, as is his right to do so. But what he said about British players and the quality of the ones that are coming through, I think is misguided. I think he's wrong. I think there are players of more than enough players of quality in the National Division who can step up and play Elite League, and I think they are entertaining. Ultimately, though, like I say, it's Ali's prerogative to sell his business to whoever he chooses to do so. Now, what happened with the Steel Dogs, and I will say here about the stuff that I can put on public record. There was an attempt. There was this press release from Planet Ice, which if you go back onto my YouTube channel and you look through, I did a bit of a breakdown of the league's press release and Planet Ice's press release. Planet Ice talk about the fact that there was a hostile takeover attempt of the Sheffield Steel Dogs. This is a thing that happened. This was not the takeover bid by Tony Smith. Those two things are unrelated. If anything, actually, Tony Smith has, in that particular situation, has kind of helped out, because Tony Smith buying the Steel Dogs, with as much as I disagree with some of the things Tony has said, he does at least understand the British hockey landscape, and he understands hockey in Sheffield probably better than the four of us here. So where people try to conflate those two things of the hostile takeover and the Steelers takeover, they are not the same thing. Let's be really clear there. The issue with Tony Smith taking over was a thing that was initially blocked within discussions within the NIHL National Division owners, and the reasons have not immediately come out. My understanding is that they were worried about what his involvement would look like, and that some of the feelings, my understanding, were kind of similar to mine. But the National Division is still a relatively new league. Taking COVID out of the way, it's only had 3 seasons, and the history of the second tier of British hockey is another great marvel that we can talk about. But essentially, the National League is developing as a product. It's a good level of hockey. I think it's entertaining, and it's on the up. And people were worried about the owner of one of the biggest teams in Britain and the chairman of the Elite League owning a team and bulldozing through and trying to get his way. Personal opinion, I think one of the things the National Division have been slowly getting better at is a bit of collaborative working. There's much more parity between the clubs at the top and the clubs at the bottom. There's difference in money because that's capitalism. But the national division was much of a closer league, top to bottom, than the elite league was, and is. But and I think they were worried about people coming through and trying to punch through and kind of upset the boat, which is still quite a young boat, newish to the seas. Ultimately, the owners have kind of chosen initially, having not wanted it, have decided that having the Steel Dogs in the league is better than not having them in the league. Ultimately, I believe that's a good decision. I think the Sheffield Steel Dogs, in their various styles of play that they've had, back from Andre Payet, God rest his soul, coaching them, through Greg Wood and now to Jason Hewitt, having a Sheffield-based team in the second tier is an asset to British hockey. And ultimately, whilst I do not believe that, given his past statements, Tony Smith has necessarily earned enough goodwill from me to not be skeptical of what's going to happen, he's now the guy who owns the Sheffield Steel Dogs. He's going to have to lay out the plan. Let's see what happens, because ultimately, some things in the NIHL National are 75% of a vote, some are 100. So if Tony can convince enough people around his way of thinking, then we'll see what happens. But it may not be the smoothest of sailings in the initial period, I think, until people are willing at that level to see that Tony's willing to kind of play ball with everybody else. I'm sure he's a really nice person to speak to. I'd love to speak to him. I think it'd be a really good thing for him to speak to somebody within the NIHL kind of media sphere to kind of allay people's fears. I've offered in public. I'll offer again right now. The mic is open for him to come and speak to me, and I'll have a robust and good conversation with him where we can disagree and it not be a disaster. But I remain I have a healthy skepticism of the situation. I do, however, wish the players and the fans well for this upcoming year. Huey's got a good squad together. He's got some of the best some of the individuals that are the best in their position in the league. So it'll be interesting to see, now they've got that stability, what Sheffield Steel Dog hockey looks like in this new era.
And that's a really good point. Some of the points you came back, I'm actually going to probably come back. Something you talked about, I want to go on. I want to kind of pull out a bit more there, but I will come back to the Steel Dogs thing, because we did get a question in from one of our listeners just in relation to Steel Dogs and potential future. But just on some couple of bits you were saying there, obviously you were saying about the gap from top to bottom in relation to the NIHL, but then you were talking about the changes that were kind of happening. It's in reality, it's still quite a young league in terms of finding its feet and kind of moving forward and everything else. And we've seen a lot of change this past week in relation to the announcing things like the NIHL rules being brought in and adopted as part of changes for the 2023-2024 season. The Department of Player Safety has now been created as kind of the same idea, the DOP style creation of player safety. Do you think this is kind of more of a way? We talked about it maybe previous years, John. I think if you agree with me, we talked about this maybe in a previous podcast about this one united kind of front for hockey right across the UK, and at the moment still looks quite, what the leagues are kind of doing, and kind of seem to be quite different. Do you think this is like maybe the first kind of instance we're seeing things starting to kind of become more joined up and in line, do you think? Or Anthony, sorry, that was to you.
I mean, given the fact the EIHA members turned down unification was a bit of a kick in the teeth, because we could have already had that. Certainly the thing with DOPS, right? And I use this adage a lot. Talent borrows, genius steals. DOPS from the Elite League, I think its execution at times has been pretty poor, but the premise is brilliant, right? It works. Like the basic premise of DOPS works. The fact they are wildly inconsistent with how they apply those rules is a thing that happens. I can't remember who it was from Guildford who didn't get a ban for elbowing a guy in the head last year when he flicked his elbow out and elbowed a guy in the head. But the idea in premise is fine. Like, it makes sense to do that. And it was that kind of application of the rules in that sense is kind of where the world is traveling. So the EIHA doing this next year is just the lower tiers is kind of catching up with what other people are doing, and that change of wording around some of the bits and pieces in the rule book, like the removal of match penalties for a lot of things. It's like I say, I mean, I don't necessarily feel that change is particularly warranted. I like the idea of a match penalty. I actually like the idea of there being a really, really severe level of penalty where you have been such a numpty on this that you need out, and you need out for a while. Like, you can properly go sit on the naughty step. Like, no beer on the bus for you, Sunshine's levels worth of stuff. But hockey as a sport is traveling in that way where we're kind of working more towards, rather than just immediately giving someone a 1-game suspension, it's like, you are out of this game and you are sat, and we are now going to sit down. Here is our framework of how we're going to assess this. Let's do that and let's move on. And actually, if the national, particularly as well, where we're looking down the barrel from what we understand of the national division kind of stepping out of the EIHA structure and the NIHL structure for 24-25 and becoming an independent entity like the BNL used to be, then they're going to need to work on that kind of premise, in the same way that the Ice League in Austria and Hungary and has that kind of thing, and the Alps League, the level below that, has the same thing. So working to that kind of premise, and also that's good for players, because they're not going to get those guys coming through, they're going to get a consistency of, maybe not everything will be exactly the same in terms of application, but the idea of this happens, so that happens, X begats Y begats Z. So that's only going to help the players know what's coming down the pipeline for them later on, which, they're the guys playing the game. It's probably good to make things a little bit easier for them to understand.
One thing I absolutely loved that you mentioned there. Sorry, you talk about options on tossable rules, but bans. One that I want to see is exactly what you just said. No beer on the bus for you, Sunshine. When can we bring in that rule on that call?
I ain't going to enforce that. I ain't having that argument with some of the boys I know.
I guess when they stop giving out, and it's the same in the Elite League, when they stop giving out booze and gin as a man of the match award, whenever it stops being that, and it's more just
fair play to Cardiff. Fair play to Cardiff. They've just done a deal with Penderyn, which is a maker of very, very nice whiskey. I mean, I'll go play for Pete Russell if that's the incentive. To be honest, I'll be the extra Brit. I'll play on the fourth line for 20 quid.
I don't know if you've ever seen the Belfast Giants man of the match presentation award. They get like a, I think it's a gin or whiskey, John, but it's in the shape of, it's a Giants Causeway hexagon. The bottle itself, the bottle just looks amazing. I just want the bottle.
I think it's gin. I'm pretty sure it is gin. I think it's Causeway, either Giants Causeway or Causeway gin.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing looking bottle. Anyway, we got off track there. John, do you have any questions before I move on?
Not a gin drinker, but I like the premise.
Good premise. John, you have any questions?
My key one is, like, we've talked a couple of times over the last couple of seasons, Anthony, the EIHA disciplinary system has come up a couple of times with some interesting decisions here or there. We saw one at the back end of last season, 2-year ban. My one thing I've always said, though, is, and I've always taken this as being a massive positive, is the transparency, the level of transparency. Now, perhaps maybe not with the 2-year ban that we saw at the end of last season. I think that one was slightly muddier than other decisions that we've seen come out of that disciplinary panel. My biggest question with all of this, with all the changes that are being made, is that transparency going to remain, or are we going to end up in the same sort of position with the NIHL, where the EIHL, for example, the DOPS is just a complete mystery. It's put your hand in a dark box, pull out a number, and that's the ban that you get. The level of fine, what is it? Who knows? Where does the money go? Nobody knows. It probably went to Tony to help him buy the Steel Dogs. But is that a risk, or am I reading too much into it with this rebrand of it being DOPS?
I think the thing that you are probably misunderestimating a little bit here is that that was only for match penalties. So if you got a match penalty, there was a set tariff depending on what you got the match penalty for. That lack of transparency surrounding disciplinary decisions is still there in the EIHA. It's a little bit of time off tombola, like you said. Hand goes into the box, pull out a number, legs 11, and kind of working out like that. But I think I I'm fortunate with the position that I've sort of ended up in, having sort of levered my way into it by accident, where I can have those conversations with people within the EIHA. And the thing I always said to them is that if you're banning people outside, you're adding on bits and pieces. Because one of the big things is, and I don't know whether they do this in the Elite League system. I think they do, but like essentially from like the repeat offender perspective with DOPS, right? Like if you like you've checked a guy to the head and like knocked him out of the game and given him a concussion, you've injured a player, and oh look, you did the same thing 6 weeks ago. You get more time. It was a penalty point system in and it still is in EIHA organised leagues, where you will, if you get a major, I can't remember the exact point numbers off the top of my head, and I apologise for that, but like say you got like a game misconduct, that's 3 penalty points. You get a match penalty, that's 5 penalty points, and you'd hit certain limits, and then you would get an extra number of games on top of that. So you might get your 3rd match penalty of the season because you've run a guy through the numbers and rearranged his teeth for him in the plexiglass. But if that's but you've also crossed the penalty point threshold. So the table that you saw that's on the EIHA website is the minimum tariff. So that is the lowest level that they'd go to. So they could increase. So like you saw with your Ayahuasca accidentally playing pole vault with his stick. And that kind of thing. But like what the table you saw was the starting point, and it kind of went up from there. And yeah, it was rules have always sort of been chopped and changed around to kind of do things in a slightly different way. Emphases have changed. I remember Ralph Sesenis, now of the Bristol Pitbulls, then of Streatham. He ended up getting a game misconduct playing for Streatham against, I think it was Invicta, because he was adjudged to have spat at Scott Bailey during a fight. This was during COVID. There was no match penalty for spitting, and there was nothing within the rules of competition to give him supplementary discipline. That's the kind of weird thing. And then mysteriously, after that happened and they realized that they couldn't do anything about it, suddenly, in-house variation of the rules. If you're a judge, you get a game or a match penalty for spitting, you will sit a minimum of X number of games. That's the kind of thing we do. The conversations I've had with the IHA about it are that I said we should know who's on the disciplinary committee. We should know who's there. It should be transparent. We should know who's making these decisions. And if you've had to rotate somebody off because, I don't know, if somebody's the club secretary for Blackburn, for example, and you sit on the disciplinary committee normally, and all of a sudden Blackburn's star player is on, as up in front of the disciplinary committee because he slew-footed a guy, who have we swapped them out for? The IHA said, we don't think it's safe because people when we've known people who've known he's been on the disciplinary committee have caught abuse in public and private. We don't think that's fair. And I said, okay, you need to at least give us the leeway of letting us know who the chair of the disciplinary committee is. Who's the person who's chaired the committee that's made that decision? Let us know that. Because ultimately, they should be an EIHA functionary, and it's a name we should all have access to anyway. Yeah, that's not happened.
It's good to know that you've got all the same issues. Actually, from us looking on the outside, it looks like you guys have got it golden, but actually, it turns out you've got all the same issues we've got.
I was just about to say, it just sounds so similar. It just, in ways, like it's things that we've talked about even here in the Elite League and on previous podcasts, where we've talked about one of the big things with DOPS and one of the big frustrations is that there's no transparency about who is the people, like who's who. Like we know that there's the person at the top that is overseeing, disciplinary in that part, but we don't know who it is that gets sent the tapes every week and has to review and do all. We don't know, and they don't tell us, But
part of me to rectify myself for not knowing that, though. I think that's the thing. I think if you know who the person is at the top and there is an accountable name, I think that works. The good thing about the tariff system was a level of consistency for the most part. The bad thing about DOPS is from the outside looking at the Elite League is the consistency of Elite League DOPS is shocking. It's all over the shop. It's more lumpier than my grandma's mash. Like, and that's the thing that confuses me. Like the thing I notice is that very few people in the Elite League are repeat offenders for the most part, and so somebody will get a penalty. They'll get banned for a couple of games, and then generally, you won't see their name pop up again. But and maybe it's the curse of my own eyes kind of looking at it, but I'll look at a thing and go, that doesn't look very nice. And you'll see something that looks even worse, and it got less games, and you just and I'm sure you guys do the same thing. Your hands go up in the air, and you just go, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I'm guessing now, kind of thing. So it's there are advantages. There were things that the IHA system did well. There are things that, like I said, DOPS as a premise is a great thing. I think it's good for the Elite League. I think it'll be good for the National League ultimately, and hopefully the whole of the IHA.
I'm going to take us back to a topic that we were talking about earlier, and obviously that was the Steelers, but I'm going to bring in a question from one of our listeners. This is from regular contributor to the show, Mark, at hotdogpan67 on X, not Twitter. He asked the question and he wanted me to put it through while we had you on. His question was, with the Steelers taking over the ownership of the Steel Dogs and what feels like an increase in two-way contracts in the Elite League, we will come back to that. Do you think it would be possible in the future for UK hockey to have a similar setup as North America, where NHL teams have affiliates in the AHL, ECHL, so the players would move up and down? So I think this is probably going to that question of the whole developmental style of stuff. And this is a question to everybody. Anybody can ask this question, but Anthony, we'll come to you first. I mean, what's your thoughts on the whole idea of potentially, that kind of structure, maybe future of,
I appreciate why Elite League fans look very heavily towards North America, because it's where a lot of your imports come from. I actually think that a system more closer to what the cooperation agreements. There's a set number of guys who can just rotate around and do whatever they want. And if they're not going to play for the big club, they can get released to the little club and used as and when. I don't necessarily think an NHL, AHL style structure is the best thing. I mean, with it being within Sheffield is now a hockey entity in and of itself, so it's a bit of a moot point there. But I don't necessarily know how well that kind of a formalized structure necessarily would work in British hockey, just because of the different way businesses are run here. I don't think in and of it. I get why people think it's a good idea, because we literally watch it work every day for the better part of 10 months of the year. But like I say, for me, I just feel like having that slightly looser structure probably would actually benefit British hockey a little bit better. And I think that's also a little bit more player centric, actually. And actually, one of the things that British hockey as a whole needs to be better at is being a bit more holistic when it comes to the approach with the players, and not viewing them so much as assets, because that's what they are in an NHL system. They are an asset, whereas actually it works differently in Europe, and it's not a bad thing that it does. Things are allowed to be different here, and being a bit more player centric in that model, and having that kind of more elongated contract where they can kind of, that sort of multi-registration thing where they can kind of play anywhere is a really, really good thing. And you can still have those development pathways. The Eisbären Berlin in the DEL have a cooperation contract with the Lausitzer Füchse, vice versa, between DEL and DL2. Vice versa have a cooperation contract with Rostock, which is my German team, and those players then go between DL2 in the Oberliga. So there is effectively just a big Venn diagram in that sort of part of East Germany, where a player can go from playing on the Baltic coast to playing in the Lausitz to playing in Berlin effectively in a couple of years, and it kind of works a bit more that way. And like I say, it just feels a bit more player centric rather than just kind of like, you chess piece move here, you chess piece move here. So yeah, I mean, like, if that's the route the Elite League really wanted to go down, I mean, it's a system and we know it works. I personally don't think it's the best system, but if we can get a better player pathway, then I don't see it's a bad thing.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. John, any pointers on that? Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with it. I think as far as the sort of affiliate thing, I think we'd all like to see a clearer pathway for the players all the way through. The biggest thing, and Anthony, you actually, I tuned into your stream a couple of weeks ago, and you said it best. I think the there is now precedent with Sheffield, and that's potentially the dangerous thing. The fee that was paid for Tony Smith to essentially operate the team in Sheffield with the Steel Dogs, this £50,000, it's effectively created a franchise fee, which is the massive potential here. So the teams with deep pockets could potentially go and do that. Now, geography is not on everyone's side. The other 9 teams, some have it easier than others. Belfast, for example, really don't have it easy. You've either got to put guys on boats or planes rather than going from one ice pad to the other in Sheffield. But that being said, look at the links that have been made with Solway, a team on the rise.
Or bring back the Castlereagh Knights.
Well, there's that as well. Absolutely. And there is still talk of the second ice pad in Belfast. If that comes, then that's potentially where it comes from. And look, that's a position where the Giants just front up the 50k, and there's your second franchise there. So yeah, there's good examples. And actually, Paddy Smith's dropping into the comments here, I notice, and he's made the point of what you were chatting about, Anthony, with the sort of the progression path. He said it here in the comments that Sam Rope with Ice Baron is on that path. Interestingly, Anthony, he also asks you a question in the comments. What's on your windowsill?
So I'll make this really, really brief. I'm apparently, in my family, awkward to buy for when it comes to birthdays and Christmas, because I like a lot of really specific things. So there is always a joke present. My mother is a woman who does not have a ton of money, but is incredibly practical. So the joke present is what my mum does for me every year. So what we have the bowling pin from my son's birthday party this year. The joke present for my birthday this year was a honky tonky donkey. So I got bought a honky tonk CD, and my mum adopted a donkey. So that's Timothy. I asked one Christmas for a monkey that's a monk with a key. So we have Brother Oo sitting over there. And I asked one Christmas for a reindeer that's ready for some reindeer. So we have a reindeer water bottle with some boots that she bought from Build-A-Bear and a rain mat that she bought from Build-A-Bear.
That's amazing.
It's only because I have what's called the hockey shelf in my house, but it's in a really awkward place where I can't stream from. So everybody gets the reindeer and Brother Oo to kind of stare at me incessantly from behind.
I love the reindeer that's ready for reindeer. That's pretty awesome.
That's pretty epic. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna bring us back to hockey if that's okay. Just kind of, we were talking about the whole idea then of the North, or the kind of NHL style kind of movement around, and obviously that's not something that maybe that's gonna ever really be effective here in the UK for UK hockey. But it takes me into the kind of the question, and this is another question that came through from MKL 2002. He sent through a good question, and it's kind of the closest thing we probably have to the kind of that swapping across of players and sharing talent, and that's obviously the two-way contracts that we're currently seeing between the EIHL and the NIHL. I suppose the question he's put is there any player this year that's on a two-way contract between the Elite League and the NIHL that you think will have the biggest impact? So will they have the biggest impact in the NIHL? So taking what they're getting in the Elite League and the experience they're getting in the Elite League, who do you think is going to have the biggest impact in the NIHL? Anthony, I suppose we'll come to you first, because obviously you probably have your thoughts on this already. Is there a player you think you've seen signed so far this season that you think is going to take what they're learning in the Elite League and make a big run? I suppose the example he has given is obviously last year we seen, well, actually it's a separate question, but he's given an example of Sean Norris made a bit of a big impact here in Belfast, especially in the playoff run, to the point where he has signed a full-time contract this season for the Belfast Giants. Do you see any player at the moment that you would see making an impact?
The big player that I'm excited to watch, and the one I think will do one, and you will probably like me for this, Mason Alderson is a very, very exciting prospect for this country. And the fact he is back home for whatever reasons he's decided to come back home is great, because it means we'll get to kind of watch him a bit better and more. The only thing I am worried about is his propensity to get ice time in the situations that suit his style with Belfast, because the thing I've said, and David McGimsey says this a lot on AVFTB, They've got to earn their ice time. They've got to earn the coach's trust. They have got to do that, but you've also got to set them up to succeed. Playing Sean Norris as a grinder is a pointless exercise. When you put Sean Norris into positions to play Sean Norris's game, and he made the point last night himself about being prepared to be adaptable. And yeah, he is adaptable. But putting Sean Norris in a position to score goals, unsurprisingly, Sean Norris scored goals. Sean Norris should have been in the EIHL full-time last year. Sam Talbot should have been in the EIHL full-time last year. They were ready then. They are both very, very ready now. But yeah, the thing with Sean, and like I say, when it eventually happened, it happened, unsurprisingly, because Sean Norris has busted his rear end. I remember watching him score 4 goals in the Division 2 national final for Slough. Like he has put in the yards and put in the miles to be where he is. The fact he has a full-time contract is a massive, massive credit to that young man. I have absolutely zero doubt that Mason Alderson is on that same path. He refuses to be denied kind of wherever he's gone. And he is the fact he's in that sort of Solway Belfast kind of loop that you got going on with Kel Beattie, who is also fantastic, scored the best own goal I've ever seen in the history of the sport in the 2022 Division 1 national final for Solway. Went absolute top bins, side-footed, top bins past his own keeper, which is don't play too touch with Kel Beattie. But no, Mason is a different gravy at this level. He is going to be really, really good for Solway like I say, my worry with the Elite League is just about these young British players being bought in, and it's like you've got to earn your ice time. Putting a goal scorer in your fourth line to crash and bang is not setting them up to succeed or you up to succeed. Don't do it. Give them the chances where they can actually show what their game, their style of play is. You will get the best out of them. Mason, if he gets the opportunity, it's going to go gangbusters. It's going to be amazing to watch.
John, same question to you. Any two-way players that you've seen on the currently signed up for? I think now, if I looked at my statistics correctly, if I looked at my data correctly this morning, I think there's only 6 teams so far in the Elite League who have taken on a two-way contract players. And actually, ironically, it doesn't look like Sheffield have actually brought in any two-way players, which is kind of slightly ironic. But John,
because it was quite late in the game with everything. So I think Tony Smith gave an interview yesterday. I think it went out on socials, and he's kind of said, "Give it two seasons." Is what he's kind of said. Interestingly enough, the name that I've had in my head here is actually one that someone has commented on in the chat, actually, and I'm going to throw this up. Casey Gallagher said Harewood on the Bristol Cardiff two-way. That's a definite interesting one to keep an eye on, and that's if I'm taking away from the fact that there you go. If I take away the fact that I would be looking at the guys in teal first and foremost, because they're the quantity that I know more than anything. That's definitely the name that I'd be looking at there as well.
Yeah, as I showed my little sticky note that I made earlier on when I was doing my notes and stuff, it's exactly who I had written down. Mainly because I just think he had a really good showing for GB as well. This past champion, during the junior championships and stuff there this previous year, but also, and again, this is I just feel like. I feel like Cardiff are usually in a good position where they kind of do, and this isn't saying that other teams aren't doing it, but I just feel like Cardiff sometimes are a team that does tend to use that as those kind of two-way contracts to their advantage quite often. Now Guildford would be the same. I would say Guildford have Zach Milton, isn't it? Is going to Guildford this year and a two-way contract there, and I think again he has high numbers already in the NIHL, but I think. The options there where Guildford maybe will have more, maybe give him slightly more ice time as well. Again, it could be an opportunity there too. But I just think
any ice time at all.
Well, I think they would. Yeah, I don't know. I just think Guildford would probably be a team that's probably more attuned to maybe giving it. I don't know. And then the other thing, and again, this is probably a controversial one. Some of the other teams have brought in goaltenders as their two-way contracts, and I mean no offense at all, and I don't mean this in any offense, and you probably understand where I'm going with this, but signing a goaltender on a two-way contract, I just feel like sometimes I think it's a bit more like lip service than it is actually, because let's be realistic, they're being brought in, some of those young lads are being brought in as like a third option goaltender. You know, and you've already got two goaltenders. Like Nottingham, I think have brought in a goaltender. I think they brought in a two-way goaltender this year, but they've already got two international goaltenders on their roster. And you kind of think, well, when's that young lad going to get a chance to actually play? So it's an interesting one when you look at it that way. Anyway, we could talk about it for ages, but
and we'll certainly not be developing them.
No. So I used to develop.
There's another name brought in there from the same person that John was talking about. Casey Gallagher has put in another name there. Jamie Smith, who was a Swindon D man. So again, we've got more people talking about other potential candidates there. What do you think of him, Anthony? You
Jamie Smith is one for the future. So right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jamie's one for the future. He's not really one for right now, but he sort of appeared out of nowhere in a Swindon team last year that lurched massively in consistency. And this year, not to give away too much of my own preview, they have the widest window as to the high and low of where they'll finish, in my opinion. But their D was an issue last year, and it meant that Jamie got an opportunity to get more minutes. Jamie Smith took his opportunity and got more minutes as a result of it. He's on the simmer, I think, is the best thing to do. How he performs this year will probably have quite a great say. Keep an eye on the name, especially if you live in the southwest, is what I'd say.
Guys, I'm going to use this opportunity. Anthony, I hope you don't mind. We're going to maybe switch focus from NIHL, maybe move towards a bit more towards the Elite League, if that's okay with you. Because we are talking about obviously those two-way players and those two-way signings that have been happening right across the off season. I was going to hope, guys, we could have a quick look just at the current rosters, transfers that have been happening over the last month or so since the last time we were recording, and just kind of get your thoughts if anybody has jumped out at you so far. John, I'm going to start off with you. Obviously, there's some exciting signings have been happening. We talked about it in our last podcast together. Some of the teams are out this year to kind of obviously change their fortune, I suppose, and I suppose reshape how they ended their previous seasons. We're looking mostly at those teams up and around the north there, up in Scotland. We talked about how we've seen a big change there in Glasgow and the moves that we're making there, and Fife were making moves too. What's your take so far? So in the last month, is there anything in particular that has jumped out at you in terms of transfers or roster changes?
You've said it right there. The biggest thing jumping out to me at the minute is Fife. I think they are going into this season. They always kind of go in as a bit of an unknown quantity, but with Tom Coolan coming in as head coach, he's made some impressive changes and seems to have made some very impressive signings. Don't get me wrong, I don't think they're going to go on a run. I don't think we're looking at a treble winning Fife Flyers team here, but I do think we're looking at a very, very different Fife Flyers team. What
is it, 12 new signings?
Something like that. It's effectively a whole new start. I mean, they're branding it as a new era. I mean, something we did in Belfast 10 years ago, but they are calling it the new era for Fife, and it really is. I hope alongside that new era, one of the biggest signings that could come is a tarmac and crew to go in and do the car park. The other two Scottish teams, I can't look past them either. I think Dundee under Mark Lefebvre, on his return to Dundee, I think he has brought what he got in North America and Europe. He's bringing people, he's bringing the contacts that he's made. That looks like a strengthened Dundee team. And Glasgow, Glasgow, the eternal question is, what are Glasgow going to do this season? Are they going to do what on paper they should, which is challenge for every single piece of silverware on offer this season? Or are they going to be the butt of every joke and completely collapse and fall apart the same way that Sheffield do after Christmas every year? Or Nottingham, after Christmas every year. So, yeah, I think the Scottish teams have a lot going on. Don't get me wrong, the big teams, I think, have done nothing but strengthen. But I think the Scottish teams have upped their game. And I think they look like... I've just noticed that our friend Fuzz has put in the comments there, are Fife going to be more competitive? Yeah, I think they are, Fuzz. I don't think there's any question. I think on paper they should be more competitive, but look, so far everyone's played no minutes, so it's just a paper exercise right now.
again, I suppose, and this is an open question to anyone who wants to take it on, or anybody has any kind of particular thoughts. Is there anybody so far from any of the teams that have signed that you think is a standout signing that is going to light up this league? I guess is the question. Silence. My first question, I suppose, then comes in the fact that, like, we have obviously Sheffield Steelers this week.
The lad from Dundee who signed, who looks like he's going to go punch everyone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. What I was going to say was we have the Sheffield Steelers who have confirmed this week. Obviously, their signing at the start of the week was for Josh Nichols, who came from the KHL into the Elite League. An interesting story of how that all came about, and how he feels about the fact that he was in a country that's at war, in a league that was in a country that was in war, and kind of escaping that kind of atmosphere and moving to the Elite League. Obviously, he's joining Iron Fox, so it's an unknown how it'll go there. But anybody else? I mean, I think if I remember correctly, was it Ericsson for Flyers, or was it the Glasgow Clan this week who announced someone, and it seemed like it was the second coming of Christ?
That's the Fife signing. That's Ericsson for Fife. He looks lights out. He looks like he. No offense to, I mean, I'm sitting here in Fife and I'm going to say this. He doesn't look like a Fife Flyers player. I'm going to say it. But that being said, Shane Owen doesn't look like a Fife Flyers goaltender. And I say that with all kudos to Fife and what they're doing this season. But this is what I was talking about. They have made signings that don't look like Fife Flyers signings. They are very clearly Tom Coolan signings.
Yeah, and I definitely think that Fife is definitely going in a completely new direction. It is definitely an interesting one, and definitely one worth watching this season coming. If anybody else have anything before we move on to our next story?
We've got a lot of teams that have a lot of changes, and I'm going to put on my tail tinted glasses here, unfortunately. What I'm actually really looking forward to, we've seen quite a bit of change in the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm really looking forward to, yes, there's a lot of great new players as well. I'm just looking forward to see Kiefer do it again. If he can do it again, like we've seen that he was able to do it with the treble last year with the team, and it's really good. Like, people were thinking, is he going to come back? Is he going to do it again? He's done it, so why doesn't he move on? Like, now it's not like he's going to get to this year and he has the same players. So if he done it again, all right, well, he had the mix. We've got a good bit of change in the Giants. So if we have a good level of success, I think that just shows, just shows a level of talent.
Look, if he does it again, Sheldon just steps to the side and Adam just takes the Leafs. I mean, that's Marty. You're the Leafs fan. You would have to be happy with that.
Yeah, I think we should put that out on Twitter. See if they'll take it. Take the bet. Kiefer for the Leafs.
I mean, look, if Kiefer went home, I don't think Kiefer went home over the summer because of his wee girl being quite young. But I mean, that would be a sore one for Sheldon, because I mean, Adam's carry-on is the treble. He needs 3 extra chairs at the table for dinner. I mean, what's Sheldon bringing?
Yeah, well, we'll talk about Sheldon and the Toronto Maple Leafs in the second period, obviously. They're big news this week. No, it's an interesting fair point, Aaron. And I suppose the big thing to say is, obviously, tomorrow we will be seeing the first, tomorrow, today, depending on when you're listening to the podcast or whatever, we will be seeing the first, I suppose, our first taste of the new look Belfast Giants. But talking about new looks, see what I did there? We're also going to see the Cardiff Devils, who Belfast Giants will be facing off against tomorrow in the SSE Arena. The Cardiff Devils, when I say new look Cardiff Devils, I don't just mean team roster. I also mean this news. We haven't had a chance to talk about it, and I know it's probably old news by now, but it's definitely something we want to talk about. And Anthony, let us know your thoughts on it too. But Cardiff Devils, in the last on the 3rd of August, start of August, on their fan night, their traditional yearly fan night, they I suppose had everything covered up, and logos on the ice were covered, and people were like, what is going on here? To the announcement that the Cardiff Devils were rebranding. raising hell and changing up their look. I mean, guys, you know, the Belfast Giants went through a brand change. We changed up our logo just over 2 seasons ago now. To probably, I don't know if there's the same level of reaction at that point, but the Cardiff Devils' reaction to the change up of their logo and how their team and everything, I suppose everything about their team. I mean, do you think it was? What's your thoughts, John?
We talked about this offline before, though, and I think it was Dave. And because I know Dave's not here, I'll put Dave's point out there. I think he made the point that it maybe wasn't as big of a reaction from the Giants fans because we had that alternate logo, a similar alternate logo beforehand. John's about to do some magic there. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So there was hints of it. It might not have been a big hint. There was a big rebrand coming, but there was hints coming, and when we saw the new logo, it was obviously a mash of what we saw was coming. Wherewith it just looks like the poor Devils fans were caught in the headlights.
Yeah,
it looked like you said it there, Marty. They were blindsided by it. They didn't know it was coming. The team gave absolutely no allusion to it that this was coming, and honestly, it's executed so poorly. The logo, all the jokes have been out there for like 2 weeks. That it looks like the laughing cow logo.
The laughing cow, love it.
This whole thing I went through. Have any of you gone through the story?
The generic brand symbol from the NIHL game, which someone did a copy of.
If anyone's gone through they've got a link from their designers on their website on the story about their sort of move and their story and why they've done it all. And some of the bits and pieces are just waffle. I mean, this design house have just created work for themselves and charged for it. The fact that the horns are supposed to look like a C and a D, in absolutely no way at all do those horns look like C and D. His mutton chops out the side are supposed to be flames. Well, if they're supposed to be flames, why are they the same colour as the face of the devil? It's just so bad. And then, of course, all the comparisons were made, as you were saying, Aaron, with the rebrand that Belfast went through. It's a move from this forward-facing logo, exactly the same as what the Giants had with the old fin, now to this profile, which, yes, is more fitting with the sort of modern game, modern logos. They said things about the fact that it's now scalable, that they can do more with it. It's an easier to use piece of branding. If that's why they've done it, then at least just be honest and say, look, we've done it because it's easier for us to send stuff to the printers and get replica jerseys made that we're still going to charge you a fortune for. And that's something I'm working on at the minute, which I'm going to bring up at a future podcast, is sort of comparison of prices for things like jerseys alongside some other stuff. And I'm working on that as a slow burn, but 130 quid for a pro jersey. And we thought we were being... Let's be honest, we thought we were being ripped off in Belfast. 120 quid last season for a pro jersey. It was stitching. Cardiff went, hold my beer. Add a tenner onto that. And here's your new logo. On some really poorly designed jerseys too, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a later podcast once all the teams have released their jerseys.
Well, we'll talk about the jersey in a minute because I did have a comment on the jersey. Anthony, did you have a comment there? You look like you were about to say something.
I don't think the logo's as bad as everybody says it is. The bigger issue is why. Like, oh, it's easier to scale. Nah, you've blown up years of branding and a logo that was actually really, really good because of convenience. Like, that's a really bad argument, fellas. Like, the Cardiff ownership have been an interesting group to watch from the outside, and they've had some hits and they've had some misses. This shot's gone out for a throw-in, boys. Like, dearie me. Yeah. Like, I genuinely, as a piece of artwork, it ain't that bad. I can't draw. So, you know, it's better than anything I would have designed. It would have been a devil's stick man if you'd asked me to draw their logo. And everybody's saying, oh, it looks horrible. No, it doesn't. It looks better than most things any of us could draw. Like, there are far worse logos in hockey in Britain. Like, it's not as bad as everybody says it is as a piece of design artwork. The bigger issue is just why they've done it. Yeah. Like, it's nonsensical. if we were at the beginning of this big new era for the Devils, which we're not really. Like, it's been a bit rocky in Cardiff the last couple of years. Things haven't quite gone the way they'd like it. Fife is a hit of the reset button. Cardiff getting a slightly better coach is not a reset. Like, it's just the turning of the wheels of minor league hockey. Like, throwing away years of decent branding because we can do more stuff with it. Literally, like I've said, they've done it for convenience. Like, that's dim. Like, hockey is a business, but it's a business that trades on people's emotions. And when you trade on people's emotions, don't do stupid stuff with people's emotions.
This stream
it's not a hard credo to live by. They've done they've made this for no reason.
This stream nerd needs reactions. I'm as Anthony, you were talking there. I needed like thumbs ups and claps and all that kind of stuff. I was thinking the exact same thing. The problem being it was that what people are doing is comparing it to the original iconic Devils logo, and because they were absolutely in love with that. That was a great logo, the original one. And then when you see the new one, you're like,
I stand the Devils logo as it was. The 97 to 2003 logo was lights out, probably one of the best in the Elite League.
Yep.
It was older than the Giants as an organization by a few years, and it looked like a progression from the original logo. This looks like a departure entirely. The same. It's actually in the same vein as what Braehead to Glasgow when that happened, because they had such a massive departure, and it meant that Anthony's right. Hockey and sport is emotional, and people wear the colours of their team. And yes, we had a fairly substantial rebrand here in Belfast, but I think because generally speaking, colour stayed the same, and the logo might have changed, but nobody feels out of place wearing an old jersey in Belfast. And I'm not suggesting that anyone in Cardiff is going to feel out of place wearing this new logo if they choose to part with their money for it. But when you've got such history behind, like an entire generation have only known this logo, and that's a tougher pill to swallow in a league of this size. Like, we're not the NHL. The Leafs, they change the logo every year and change the pattern of the leaf a little bit. Some fans go absolutely ape about it. Sometimes it actually looks okay, but there's a tradition of updating and changing, but not a rebrand like this.
And I come back to what Anthony said. Two things, and I think both John and Anthony, you both mentioned it. The logo itself, it does grow on you, okay? And I don't mind it as a logo, as a brand, in terms of its saleability, in terms of how it can be, and it should be about how it's used and how scalability in terms of, and it shouldn't be. So on branding and on shirts and t-shirts and the things I've seen so far merchandise wise, it looks pretty good. On hats, it looks like it should. Like, it looks really, really good. But you're right. It's the timing just didn't make sense. I think if they were going to go for a brand change of this magnitude, of this big scale, what really should have happened was when Todd Kelman and that ownership took over, back when they took over, they should have thought about the branding at that point so that it was like a new. This is the Cardiff Devils. I know, Aaron, you're shaking your head because it was already.
I said no to that. Could you imagine new ownership? By the way, the first thing I'm doing is I'm changing the logo.
Well, do you remember the past? Do you remember the past and history of the Cardiff fan base? I mean, they drove out an owner.
I just think if you're gonna be coming in, you're gonna be making changes. It's a brand new start for a club. Then the brand new start should come with a brand new logo at that time. And I just think maybe, as you say, Anthony, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think it's wrong timing for it, and a mix of that and blindsidedness we were talking about earlier on. We could talk about this forever, and we will see whenever sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
Before we move on, there is another, just because I'm keeping an eye on the comments, Casey Gallagher has another comment for us, another question. Do you see them potentially switching back to the previous logo within a few years? Jan's rebrand looks good, though, but I'll say the Devils logo is grown on me, especially with the recent video of bounce training. I've got to admit, I don't think they might do a like what we do like legacy jersey every so often, don't we? Oh,
yeah, we'll do like a legacy or well, don't get me started on the legacy jersey because we had legacy. we had
do that throwback jersey that's not a throwback jersey again.
We had the legacy retro throwback last season in January or whatever. March last season we had it in the Elite League. It was like a retro weekend. What did the Belfast Giants? The Belfast Giants have a perfectly good like alternative logo. Like our old logo is still perfectly good. We could still use it. Why didn't we just design it? Or don't get me started. Don't get me started. Let's not get me started.
I used the pivotal word there, legacy. Let's move on from legacy jerseys. I don't think so, Casey, to be honest with you. I don't know what anyone else thinks, though.
Yeah.
That was the sound of a car crash of a conversation that I think we need to get some therapists in for, fellas.
That's what you're here for, Anthony.
Me. Yeah. Well, I was going to say the thing I picked up from this conversation was pro jerseys. Who's paying £130 for a pro jersey? Because, spoiler alert, unless you're a pro, why are you bothering? Why?
Wait, hang on. This way.
Why? You're all pointing in different directions.
I'm trying to get the right
I'm trying to find which. Hang on. Oh, this way. No, wait. This way. John. It's like.
And you
I
bought
haven't
one.
yet.
No, I haven't.
That's a replica.
No,
That's a replica.
Dave's definitely bought some.
Dave bought one.
Dave has. That's just the screen print. No, don't get me wrong.
Because Norris weird. That's an odd thing to do. Like I bought game worns when we were in the Elite League. I have game worns upstairs from when we were in the Elite League with fight straps and stuff. I have a Brad Cruikshank game worn from when he was in Coventry when they won the title. Sorry, Belfast fans, 2010 was fun. There's a story about that for later. But like, if it's a replica pro jersey, seems a contradiction in terms. And like, a fool and his money is soon parted, right? 130 quid for a pro replica. Okay, I have some magic beans to sell you.
That'll be me. Look, we've chatted. So the end of last season, we love when someone comes to play for Belfast and wears the number 14. So of course, when Norris stepped up and put 14 on, we thought, right, okay, looks good. Through the playoff run, wow, he's really good. And then through the summer when he was announced as being signed, I'm pretty sure all four of us, and maybe not Dave because he already has his pro jersey, but at least me and Marty have already said, yeah, it's the Fry meme. Take my money. Hurry and take my money.
Well, I did say a 14 jersey, but I didn't say pro. That's the one thing I will say. Now, the one thing I will say about the pro versus the pro replica versus just the standard print replica, I know you're saying about the price of money wise is a big difference, and I agree. Yeah, it's a massive jump between having £60 and £120, so it's always double the price. Is the quality worth the price that you pay difference wise? And you're probably thinking, well, why do you need it if you're not going to be wearing a pro? The quality is significantly better. Like, I mean, that the stitched on logo, the stitched on names, numbers, nameplates, and everything else that you got on it, it is significantly different. Like, I mean, it's night and day. I mean, the arms on the standard replica jersey of the ones that we're getting from Warrior, I think, isn't that who's designing ours? They're so short on the replica, like just standard £60 ones. They're so short, but whenever it comes to the pro ones, they're proper length, just everything about it. There is a different quality difference, but I don't know if I don't think I would part the 120, which is probably gonna be 130 this year. Let's be honest.
Do you know what? The biggest part of it is that we're just jersey nerds.
We are. Yeah.
Dave's horrified. He's just messaged saying that there's jersey talk, and I'm not here, and he's not here.
Well, yeah.
That's right. Sorry, there he is. Hey, Dave.
Anything else before we move on to our last story for this period?
Nope.
Great. We will come back to Jersey Talk. Thank you, Anthony, because we will definitely come back to it before the season's out. Because once the teams start to release their jerseys, we'll start to kind of compare and contrast and have a look and see what we think in terms of those. And I will make sure I let you know, Anthony, who in this team decides to buy a replica pro jersey. I'm sure John will. Okay, let's move on to our final story of this period. John, I think you added this one in. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, just very quick. Just wanted to mention that a couple of weeks ago now it was announced, I think just after our last podcast, it was announced that the Elite League have hired someone into the position of Head of Commercial Operations. And it's someone that we know quite well. It's Mark Brooks, is back in ice hockey. He's back with British Ice Hockey. If you're from Belfast, if you've been a fan of Belfast for anything more than about 4 or 5 years, you'll likely have seen Mark around the rink, around the arena. Mark was with the Belfast Giants organisation from, I think, quite a young age, actually. I think he'd been a volunteer and then got a position with the team. And I'm going to mirror some comments that the AVFTB guys said yesterday. We wouldn't be in the position where we are now with things like access and just having the balls to ask the question, can we get access, if it wasn't for how good Mark was to us in the first year or so of Door 14. So from our perspective, it is absolutely fantastic to see Mark back with the EIHL and bringing the experience that he's got from Ulster Rugby across to the Elite League, and we wish him all the best and hope that he brings much commercial success to the Elite League. If you could start on a TV deal, Mark, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sentiments are correct, John. He did give us a step up into the CHL. Was one of the ones as well, as well. He made sure we got our media credentials for the CHL. So we were always thankful for Mark, because he was always willing to kind of have a chat with us about stuff and help us out whenever we needed it. So fair play. It's good to see. Although it still hurts my heart when I see him today posting stuff about the Sheffield Steelers. It's kind of like, it feels a bit dirty that he's posting stuff, but he has to now. Yeah. Anthony, we are moving on from period 1, which is our local hockey. You're very welcome to stay if you'd like to stay. We're going to move on to period 2, which is our, obviously, stories from across the pond. It's up to yourself. If you're happy to stay, you're more than welcome.
I wore the t-shirt.
There you go. There we go. That was going to be my next question. That was going to be my next question when we were moving into the next period. Was going to be, do you have an NHL team? So there you go. You've answered that question for us. Great, guys. Then with that, we will move on to our period 2 of hockey.
Welcome everyone back to period 2 of hockey, which we're going to talk about international hockey. Now, usually it's Dave that handles this, but he is just hanging out in the background there, talking to us about jerseys in the chat there. So say everyone hi to Dave in the background. So we do have this period where we're going to look at international hockey, pretty much anywhere that's not the UK, and so see what's going on around the world. We do have a number of stories. We've got 2 stories from Marty, and we've got 1 story from John. So I'm thinking of having a Marty sandwich. What we're going to do is we're going to start. Yeah, I know. We're going to start with 1 story from Marty. We're going to switch across to John, and then come back to another one of Marty's stories. Hope you're all interested for a Marty sandwich. Marty, you have a really cool story here about the highest paid actor in NHL.
Actor? Player, you mean?
Actor, player. You're talking about threat actors all day. You've got to forgive me.
Yeah, it was just basically, this is the story. Obviously, if you are living under a rock, unless you're living under a rock, I don't know how you wouldn't have seen the story. But this is the breaking story that from this morning, from the early hours this morning, on the 24th of August, for anybody who's wanting to know what date it is. This was obviously the story, and we talked about this earlier on, was the Toronto Maple Leafs have announced that Austin Matthews has penned a paper on a deal that is set to make him the highest paid player in NHL history. He is signed on for a 4-year deal, estimated at £53 million as an extension, and that will tie him into the team for until 2027-2028 season. So that's 4 more years. Now, it's massive amount when you think about it, in terms of the next player down after Matthews is Nathan McKinnon, who is on 12.6, followed by I think Oilers, I think, is the next one. Potentially Connor McDavid, I think, is maybe the next one down after that, top 5. But this is I suppose this is where we're looking at in terms of multi-year deal for extreme amounts of money. The reason why I'm bringing it up is 2 things. Obviously, it's a massive coup for the Maple Leafs. I don't know if he was ever planning to maybe look outside of the Leafs, but obviously it's a massive coup for the Leafs to have that knowledge. They've signed up the most, the key player, their captain, and everything, or the most influential player they've had in such a long time, and they've been able to kind of cement him for 4 years. Question came then to me, and it's something I was reading today. People were discussing on social media, and I kind of did wonder if it's maybe something we've seen in the past. So previously we've seen before the previous lockout, NHL lockout and player agreement, we've seen contracts starting to creep up. So we've seen contracts in the NHL starting to become multi-year deals. I remember in and Fuzz, actually, you're on the chat. You can maybe you can kind of remind me of this. New Jersey Devils, if I remember correctly, had signed a player for 10-year deal, if I remember correctly. And it was for quite an extortionate amount of money at that time too. But that all kind of fell apart quite quickly after the players' deals came in, and the player association stepped in and said we can't continue with these multi-year deals. So the question I was coming up with, and the question I wanted to ask, was kind of get your thoughts in terms of, are we seeing a new rise in a multi-year deal and money starting to kind of creep up more and more? John, what's your thoughts?
Well, it's going to come. Thank God the cap's going up. That's the only reason that these deals are getting made, is because the NHL have announced that the cap is going to continue to creep up and up and up. We're going forward in time, but we're almost going back in time. And you've said it; these deals used to come up, and they're going to come up more and more often. There you go. There's Fuzz answering your question, Ilya Kovalchuk. And actually, Fuzz made another really good point in the chat. Is he worth it? He's a great player, but struggles to find his groove in the playoffs. This only works for the Leafs if you get to the next stage. I mean, yes, you broke the first round curse this year, didn't you? But you didn't win anything. So having the most expensive player, having the most expensive player doesn't win you trophies.
No.
What it does is it reduces your cap space for everything else. He can't go off and win can't win the Stanley Cup himself. So they are restricting their spending elsewhere, and you will see the effect of this on the roster. Sheldon Keefe is going to have some work to do. I mean, it was surprising. I think everyone was potentially surprised that, given the run with the change of boardroom staff in Toronto, it was surprising that Sheldon stayed this season. I think he's got this season. I think that's the reality. I think he's got this season to do something. He's got this now in his back pocket, knowing that the high likelihood is that Austin will stay in Toronto longer than he will. So at least he doesn't have to worry about that. So something has to click here. When you say the Avs were second then with McKinnon, at least he did something. At least the Avs went and did something. The Leafs have to do something now.
Looking back on that New Jersey Devil contract you were talking about. Now, Dave shared a link, and I found a different link there. That was it's either based on the two stories, a 15 or a 17-year deal. One for $100 million for the 15-year deal, or for the 17-year deal, $102 million.
Who's signing these people? Dr. Evil.
And then that whole
convention, didn't they?
Yeah, and then the ironic thing was then Kovalchuk then not even halfway through, I think maybe 2 or 3 years into that contract, went, I'm homesick and I want to go back to the KHL. And then he left, and then a year or two in the KHL, he went, I want to come back to the NHL. And it was just ironic that he kind of switched after getting such a large contract, switched out, went to KHL, switched out again, come back to the NHL. I think he went to LA Kings, I think, when he came back, and was getting nowhere near the same level of contract or level of anywhere near it, because they were like, well, you're kind of a hot potato. You're kind of like, I don't know if we want to touch that. Anthony, what's your thoughts in terms of the whole idea of this creeping up? Do you think that's something that we're seeing again?
Well, the NHL is the poor relative of North American sports when you look at contracts compared to the NFL, compared to Major League Baseball. I think it's going to be a pressure from the players, because ultimately these are billion-dollar organizations. Billions if you're Arizona. I think the thing with Matthews is that it's a very, very sizable spend. I think it's 15-16% of their cap. But the only, and I'm wearing the t-shirt, and the thing I will say about, like, one player can't win trophies, but one player can be enough to make people believe. And I don't mean the fans, I mean the players. Alexander Ovechkin has won one Stanley Cup in his time, but you look at the roster that was around him. The Capitals of 17-18 that won the Stanley Cup were objectively a worse team than the 16-17 Capitals that came before it in terms of the talent on that roster. If Toronto are on the bubble and a guy is given an option of $1 million to play for Anaheim, say, who are in the middle of the pack, or $850,000 to be within touching distance of the cup, where will the guy go? And the answer is he'll be getting very cold feet in December, because he will go to Toronto to play with an Austin Matthews, to play with a Mitch Marner, to play with a well, I was going to say whoever's in goal now, because it's pretty much a guess as to who's in net for the Leafs at this stage as anybody else. Keith Petruzzelli, maybe by the next time it comes around. But this number is always going to creep up, because the NHL, despite the fact that hockey as a sport sometimes seems to shoot itself in the foot like it's the First World War and people want to get out of the trenches, the money is going to go up. It's going to have to go up if hockey wants to be able to compete on that level of being that international sport that it is. We're going to see more things. I know a lot of people were freaking out the back. Oh, why can't they convince this guy to sign for 8 years instead of 4? Because probably the writing on the wall is that it's obviously a 4-year extension to his deal, so he doesn't kick in for a little while. He's not going to be the highest paid player by AAV by probably the second year of his contract, because Draisaitl and McDavid are going to be like Scrooge McDuck, and he knows that by the time that 4-year extension comes around, the summer of 2028, dude's just gonna have he will be like Dr. Evil. He'll have a solid gold toilet and he'll have a laser on the moon, unless he gets massively injured. And but Austin Matthews is a generational talent, and he is going to make a stupid amount of money, which, given the fact he plays for the richest franchise in our sport, bar none, he should make the money that he is worth to the organization that makes a ton of money to, I don't know, put a milk logo on his jersey.
Love the milk logo jersey.
That's nice.
Oh, I love it too. It's great. It's better than a casino.
Yeah, very good reference. Just before we move on to the next story, I just want to point. I know we were talking about some big numbers there. I was just doing some quick math at the side. And we were talking about like 100 million for 10 years or so. That kind of breaks down to 6.6 million per year. With the Austin Matthews contract, yeah, okay, it was only for 53 million only, but it was only a 4-year contract. So that kind of breaks down to 13.2 or 13.25 million per year.
Yeah. I know.
That's a sizable chunk of change. You said it's not.
He could probably just about afford a ticket to actually go and see a Leafs game.
Well, that's very true.
Anyway, so we now have a good base for our Marty sandwich. We're going to pivot across to John for the fill-in. So we're going to talk about. It sounds so wrong. The IHF World Champions schedule release. John, it's over to you, buddy.
Yeah, so the 2024 IHF World Championship game schedule has been announced. Nice easy run in for GB, lads. At Prague Arena, the competition will be split over the two pools between Prague Arena and Ostrava Arena. Obviously, we're going to concentrate on what Great Britain are in Pool A. They will play on day 2 of competition with a very easy first game against a small hockey country called Canada. I'm sure that's bound to be a surefire win for GB there. So interestingly enough, so they've also released the pricing structure for these games as well, about sort of essentially how much it's going to cost to go and see these games. So, for example, the opening game of the competition, Switzerland versus Norway, is going to cost in Category 1, so the most expensive tickets, just over 4,000 kroner, or Czech something. Is it kroner?
Yes, I want to say yes.
I think so.
Sure.
Yes.
There's a K in there, and the only currency I know that has a K in it is kroner. The Great Britain game has been put down as the family game the next morning. Interestingly, given that it's against Canada. Ticket prices are down to 390 kroner. So a reduction of just under 4,000 kroner for this to go and see Great Britain play Canada. Seems like a cheap way to go and see Canada.
John, do we know what these are in UK? Do we have a conversion there to see how much they are in UK?
Absolutely
pounds?
not. It could be a 50p difference for all I know.
Let's have a look and see. So,
4,000, I could go out and buy a small car.
390 krona is £13.86.
That's cheaper than an Elite League game.
that's yeah.
There you go.
When you see the comparison down, it's 4,000, 4,000, which is, I'm just looking now, £148 for the first opening game, first two opening games.
There's no way I'm paying that.
Yay! Aaron appreciates that, I'm sure.
So to carry on with the rundown of how Great Britain's games will go, their first game then is on the Saturday, as I said. The Sunday, they will then play Finland. Their next game then is a couple of days later on the Wednesday when they will play Switzerland. Then, thankfully, they get another day's rest before on Friday they will play Denmark. Next day, on Saturday the 18th, they will play Czechia. A day's rest again before they play Norway. And then their final game the following Tuesday is against Austria. And once again, Great Britain have been selected in the family-friendly cheap game on the final day. So interesting, clearly interesting decisions being made there about what teams will play in the family-friendly games. So guys, that's Pool A, that's GB's running. What do we reckon? They're definitely making it to the knockout portion of the tournament, aren't they?
Sure.
Silence speaks volumes.
With the best tickets they can get in the front row to watch it.
Absolutely.
It's a tough run in. It's a bit of a tough run, but there's 3 winnable games in there for me for GB. I think there's the potential. They've just got to perform. I think it's probably the big thing there. An absolute worst case scenario, that last game with Austria is going to be a must win, irrespective. I think potentially. So I will watch it with the Austrian commentary because I prefer German commentary to British commentary a lot of the time. Thank you to my VPN. But yeah, that's but the bad stuff's out the way quick.
Fair.
Get the first couple of games out of the way, grit your teeth, take your medicine, and then switch on and then push on from there. Or they're about to spring the biggest surprise world hockey has seen since the 40s.
I like the really positive upbeat there. It's like, you know what? It's not the worst thing in the world. It's, hit the wall hard first and then tell our stories. I like that.
I would completely agree. I mean, it's, we kind of maybe go in with a bit of doom and gloom because we're thinking obviously that they're up against a big ask in terms of when you see the big names, the big teams they're playing up against, and it's fantastic to see them playing up against the big top countries in terms of Canada and the likes of that, and it's amazing. But I think you're right, Andy. I think looking at those fixtures and looking at the way they're working and how they're shaped up in terms of the gaps and stuff between breaks as well, I genuinely do think I want to be positive in thinking that they could pull at least 3 maybe out of the bag. I was hoping maybe 4, and it's piqued my interest. And it's definitely one of the ones I will be like. I'm looking forward to the World Championships next year, for sure. And I just, we never know. You never know.
Yeah, I think
that's May
what I would
next
say
year.
is
May next year.
May. Yep, May next year. I think the one thing I would say is, I know we probably know what the result will be, but the fact that we are playing Canada in not just our first game, but their first game of the tournament as well. Let's just say it could be an entertaining game. I wouldn't want to hit them when they're hot. I'd rather get them right at the start of the tournament. Now, it might be wrong. It might be that they've got Canada arrive with something to prove. But so do Great Britain. Great Britain have got to prove that they belong in this pool. That they've come back here for a reason. And you never know. Like Anthony says, this could be the biggest upset since the last gold medal.
Definitely. Cool. So we'll move on. We do have one last story, but Anthony, I'm just going to ask you. I know that we don't have anything in the running order here from yourself, but I was wondering, have you seen anything in the international hockey that's really piqued your interest in the last week, month, maybe, since the last time we recorded? Putting you on the spot, I completely
the big
appreciate
thing for
that.
me, fellas, is this. No, the big thing for me is this weekend. The AIHL finals. Australian hockey comes to its conclusion this coming weekend at the O'Brien Ice House in Melbourne. They have the Australian League is decided. They don't have they have a regular season, but it's all decided off the back of their playoffs, which was slightly expanded this year. But 2 semi-finals on the Saturday, final this coming Sunday. We're going to have, there's a few guys from the AIHL who are going to be making their way over to NIHL teams. I've been a watcher of Australian hockey since, since the early 2010s, and so I'm looking forward to seeing how the season shapes up. It does cost. Though interestingly, this amateur league of about sort of 10 12 teams, they have this really weird thing where they have like a game center where all the teams kind of film their games all by themselves, and then you can watch it all in one place at the same time. You just pay one price, right? And you can just watch whatever you want at the different times it's on, and then if you miss a game, you can just go back and watch it. Like, it's really crazy, isn't it? Like, what a weird idea that no one has ever thought about doing anywhere before. For £60. Actually, no, tell a lie. It was 60 Australian dollars. So it was 42 British pounds to watch this. But for folk who are interested, I think you can get like a finals pass for like 20 Australian dollars. The first game is going to be a bit of a tough one for you because the Sydney Bears take on the Melbourne Mustangs at 5:00 in the morning on Saturday. But at 9:30, you do get the CBR Brave and the Perth Thunder, followed by the final on Sunday. Or if you don't have money and you want to, or you don't want to pay for such things, the New Zealand League, they stream for free on YouTube, and those games will be facing off anywhere between kind of like 5 and 9 o'clock in the morning, Saturday, Sunday this weekend. So there's tons. If you want to watch competitive hockey right now and you aren't fussed about preseason in the Elite League and people laughing at Cardiff's logo, go hunt it out because it's there to watch and it's good fun. And if nothing else, listening to Australians commentate on ice hockey is hilarious. But the guy I know the guys who are going to be doing the commentary this weekend, and they're great, so it'll be fun.
Awesome.
5 a.m. face-off is like it's just made for the way that my daughter is sleeping at the minute.
You actually, and Anthony, you read my mind when you were talking about the playoffs. I was like, and how can we watch this? And you were like, hey, there's this a really amazing location to watch all of these matches. Loved it. So you read my mind. Thank you so much, man.
AIHL.tv. It's in there. It's great.
John, make sure you've got that written down for the website.
Mate, I've already followed them on Twitter from Door 14.
On it. Marty, let's finish off this Marty sandwich by bringing it back to yourself by talking about the Canadians prospect, Logan
Malo. Yeah. We've talked about this name before. This is kind of, obviously it's a serious enough topic, a serious enough conversation, but it's something that's worth mentioning because obviously there's a big decision had been made for this young player's career this past couple of days. Logan Malo is probably not a strange name. Maybe some people don't know the story, but we talked about it on this podcast back about 2-3 years ago now in 2020. This is a young lad who was eligible for NHL draft for as a prospect, and unfortunately he was playing at the time when he was playing in Sweden. He was 17 years of age, and he was convicted in Sweden for sharing without consent a photograph of a young lady that he was with at the time. Between his teammates, he shared it in the locker room among his teammates and on a WhatsApp group, I think, or a messaging group anyway, and he shared this photograph without consent, obviously, and as a result, because of his charge for this and his actions, the NHL and Gary Bateman at the time came out and said that it was. I suppose it wouldn't be an appropriate thing for him to be moving forward, but also at the time, Logan Mallow took himself out of the running as well and said that he doesn't deserve an opportunity to, I suppose, be involved with an NHL draft given what he had done. The big story, I suppose, this week came in that the decision has been made from Gary Bateman and the commissioner and the league in general, where they have said that because of his behavior over the last number of years, his acts in the community, his taking responsibility and his outreach in order to kind of educate other young men about the, I suppose, childish behavior. He was 17. I mean, there's no, I shouldn't have done it. But he, over the last 3 years, he has tried to make rights in terms of the actions that he's done, in terms of trying to, as I say, community outreach, working with other young males, trying to talk about the fact that, like, you know, thinking about your career, thinking about your life, and thinking about the things that you do when you're young and how they have a massive impact on your future career prospects. And because he's done so much around this and how much he's given back, the NHL have said that he is eligible for this year to play in the NHL, as long as he meets the criteria for the I suppose the training team, the training prospects this year for the Canadiens. So I just wanted to bring the story up because I know we did talk about it. I know it was like 3 years ago now, but I just wanted to bring this back. Guys, I mean, in terms of, you know, a young man who obviously made a decision at the time, was a serious behavior. It was a serious thing that happened, obviously. And I mean, do you think this is the right move in terms of, you know, has he made enough penance? Do you think this is a good sign for, or this is the right steps and the right movement for the NHL? John?
I think the important thing here is that he seems to have had a step change in what he accepts or what he now accepts was unacceptable at the time, and the sort of furore about everything that kind of came out when the Habs decided to draft him. I see from the piece, and I remember talking about it at the time. Justin Trudeau even weighed in on the decision. He's a lifelong Habs fan himself, and he said he was disappointed in the team's decision to even consider drafting him. Given, again, we've talked, there's been a few of these similar stories, or stories of a similar ilk, where young lads in the game have made very poor decisions, very poor choices, and it's how long is an appropriate length of time for these guys to pay for that. And without passing any judgment at all here, has he served enough time here? And I'm not going to say he has or he hasn't here. I think that's a decision that the Habs organisation have to make their mind up about. It's a decision that the young man himself has to decide. Ultimately, it's something that Habs fans, if he is going to pull on the Canadiens jersey, they're going to have to make peace with it as well. We saw how a situation of this ilk nearly caused the end of a franchise here in the Elite League, with a potential signing in Glasgow, which has now led to new ownership. It's led to an entirely new coaching staff and blah, 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 so on. I don't for an instant believe that that's going to lead to the same sort of situation happening in Montreal. That's absolutely not what's going to happen here. But the fans will have to decide if they're happy for this young man to come and play for their team, if that's the decision that the organisation makes. We're talking about it here, and Fuzz is on again and makes the comment, do you think there'll be protests outside the arena? No, probably not. I think this is a different situation. I might be wrong. I think there's going to be the one or two people. There will be the conservative element. There will be the people who feel very, very strongly about it, and they have every right to hear their voices or have their voices heard on the situation with regards to what their team is doing as well. They're money-paying fans. Their money keeps the franchise afloat. They have a voice in what happens. The organisation doesn't necessarily have to listen to it, though. So it's a tough one. And honestly, I don't know what the right answer is.
Anthony, Aaron, any other comments?
Anthony, go ahead first, buddy.
Are we all forgetting that, like, over a decade ago, just over a decade ago, like 11 years ago now, that Coventry tried to sign Mike Danton? Do we remember that? That Coventry tried to sign a guy that was convicted of solicitation to murder. Hockey has a really, really weird way of dealing with people, because hockey people are always deemed irrespective to be good people because they're hockey people. Now, I believe very strongly that, as I said earlier, people can change, right? And Logan, should he have been drafted? 100% no. Terrible, terrible look for the Habs as an organization. The most historic organization in the NHL. Just a dumb move. Keep tabs on him if you think he's a good player and see if he can rectify himself. Does he deserve an opportunity to prove that he has reformed as a character? Yeah, he does. Does that necessarily mean he should get the privilege of playing hockey at the NHL level? That's the question I can't quite rectify myself to at the moment. For people who sort of agonize over this kind of thing, as that sort of rattles around in my brain, there's a really good podcast series called Commons, which was done by Canada Land relatively recently, which was all about hockey's issues around sexual assault and their dealings of it, both as players to bits and pieces, like sort of not just things like Kyle Beach, but other things like that. So I'd really recommend people kind of like, if you want to kind of tackle those questions in your own head, that you go and listen to stuff like that. People are going to be happy, and there'll be a lot of people saying he deserves his chance to be heard and to play. How much penance does the young man have to pay? There are people that will not be happy about it. I mean, the other thing as well, he's been playing in the OHL. Like, he didn't just disappear. He's not been sat at home twiddling his thumbs. He's been playing in the best junior development league on earth. Like, getting ready for this moment, doing bits and pieces. So it's not like his life's been on hold. This young guy has just been rocking and rolling away, playing for the London Knights. So not just in the OHL, probably one of the biggest clubs in major junior hockey in the world. So if he has made those changes, more power to him. He's made a terrible mistake, and he has hopefully learned from that, 20 or however old he is now. Whether he deserves the privilege of being a hockey player in the National Hockey League is something that I think is not going to sit well for a lot of people, and I confess to struggling with the decision.
Yep, agreed. Aaron, any thoughts before we move on?
No, I kind of everyone here has a really good view. I don't know, really good is not the right way to put that, but it's a difficult conversation to have. Like, he was young, is 17 young? I don't know, but he has seemed to have turned it a bit around. Doing so that, you mentioned a number of outreach programs there, so he's trying. It seems like he's trying. But as Anthony said, there's going to be people on many sides of this coin on what the outcome is. And I don't know where I sit. so I don't. But he deserves the opportunity, I think, to show that he has changed. He's trying, but whether that's within the NHL, that's another thing.
Yep, fair point. Thank you.
Before we leave period 3, there's something that's just occurred to me to ask while Anthony is here with us. Given that T-shirt that you're currently wearing, I want to ask you something very much in particular to do with the Capitals. Alex Ovechkin is currently sitting on 822 goals. He is currently 73 behind the Great One. For a Caps fan, can he do it? Will he do it? And has he got enough time to do it?
Yes, he's going to do it. He will probably break the record sometime in 2025. As a franchise, the Capitals are very much in a holding pattern right now, in the sense of we're not quite good enough to go deep in the playoffs, I don't think. We've got an aging core. You think of Backstrom and his bad hip. We think of Oshie, he's had injury issues. Tom Wilson's obviously now signed this big contract. And essentially, we're keeping Ovi and friends together. And as soon as Obi finishes, breaks the record, as he will and as he should, because he's, he is arguably the greatest goal scorer of all time. Once Obi does that, it's kind of a weight off the Capitals' back as an organization, because Alex Ovechkin should not break this record anywhere apart from Washington. Once it's done, this franchise can do what it needs to probably do, and that's hit the reset button. Caps can rebuild. We can move on some of these bigger pieces, like Darcy Kemper probably won't return at the end of this contract. John Carlson is edging, is closer to the end of his career than the beginning. Oshie to the end of the beginning. Backstrom, whether he makes another couple of years, will be really, really telling. But yeah, the Caps are at a point where it's hold on, hold the line, get over the line, and when that's done, kaboom! It's going to be blown up like it's going to be blown up like you've never seen for some time. We are going to be 2006, like Brian Helmer, Chris Clark levels worth of terrible again. It's going to be fun to watch for a few years. We're going to be worse than Chicago are now.
When he gets the record, do you think they'll do what Nashville would do and do the right thing and raise a banner?
No, because they won't need to. Because the second Alexander Ovechkin retires from the NHL, given the fact he will be the highest goal scoring player in the history of the league, the second he retires, his jersey will be retired by Washington, and I am pretty certain the Hockey Hall of Fame will forego the waiting period. He will go pretty much straight in. As he should. You can argue about its politics. You can argue about its politics and things like that. As a hockey player, he is up there with Gretzky, with Richard, with every great goal scorer that's ever played the game. He is a singular individual, and he'll be lauded as such, as he should be.
In respect to that, then, does 8 join 99?
No.
Does 8 join 99 in retirement?
Alexander Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer of all time. No. Alex is the greatest goal scorer of all time, but he's definitely not the greatest player of all time. If you look at the numbers for the other statistical categories, he doesn't come close, and it'd be wrong to do so. If you're not going to retire 4 for Bobby Orr, if you're not going to retire 9 for Gordie Howe, if you're not going to retire the for the Richards, or 33 for Patrick Roy, there's so many great players. You could think of all the great players that have been not just good, not just great, but just impactful and game changing in their positions, right? And the biggest difference for Gretzky was impactful in every element of the game, to the point where his moving from one club to another is probably the seismic shift of the sport. Like Bobby Orr retiring didn't do that. Gordie Howe moving clubs didn't do that. Wayne Gretzky going from Edmonton to the LA Kings when he did changed the game. Literally changed hockey as a sport. It's up there with the 1972 Summit Series in terms of its impactful nature on hockey as a game worldwide. So no, Alex is great. He's the greatest Washington Capitals to ever wear the jersey. The chances of his jersey being retired league wide are 0, and I have absolutely 0 problem with that.
Cool. Right, sorry, Aaron, I hijacked period 2 there.
Some great questions, man. So don't be apologizing. I think that's coming us to the end of period 2. Of course, with no games, we have no penalty box. So Marty, no, not Marty. On, yeah, possibly with you. Period 2. No, carry on.
Welcome to period 3 after Aaron was cut off there because he wouldn't stop talking.
So
period 3.
The Oscars playoff music.
Period 3 is our general Knocky news.
I didn't join you there. No, I'm sorry. I forgot. Completely forgot.
Knocky news is...
Completely forgot.
Knocky news is... Sorry, it's the start of a new season. We're fine. Knocky news is where we just throw in a couple of stories usually that don't fit either neatly into period 1 or period 2, or we think that the other 2 have just got too many things in them, so I get to present them over here in period 3. There's only a couple of stories here in period 3. Marty, I'm going to throw over to you first. I think this is the sort of more serious, more impactful story here about what's happening over in Ayr.
Yeah, so I just wanted to raise this because it's something that someone sent through to me about the obviously the currently they're trying to bid to keep the rink in Limekiln Road in Ayr open, hopefully for at least the next 5 years anyway, until a new facility can be built. At the moment, there is a risk that obviously it's being used by Scottish curling, but it's also being used as a hockey facility as well as figure skating, and that's why we want to talk about it, because obviously it's an ice pad in Scotland that we kind of want to highlight. But there is a threat that the facility is going to be closed down, and there's currently a petition underway that people are looking to get signed. Now, I don't know if you need to be a Scot. I don't know if you need to be living in the around area to sign the petition. I think just generally anybody can go on and sign the petition. It doesn't really matter where you're from. But there is a shout out and I suppose a plea and a call for nationwide anybody who has an interest in ice sports of any kind, be that ice hockey, curling, skating, whatever that might be, to I suppose get behind this this call to action and get on and sign the petition if you can. They are looking to close the rink at the end of August, the start of September, so we've got very little time left. Actually, I think it's the end of September. Actually, now it's been pushed back to, but they are looking to try and close it down. And I suppose what they're trying to do is trying to get as many names onto this petition as possible. It does have 12,000 at the moment, but they are looking to try and keep pushing that forward, so it's even more to show the need for, I suppose, an ice plant. The last thing we want to see is an ice plant closing down. We know ourselves here in Northern Ireland, we have very few ice pad opportunities. We only have the one other ice pad in Dundonald. We've always had the one that talked about in Coleraine and trying to raise one in Coleraine. I think was up around what's called that centre in Coleraine. I think there was always talk to try and get that relaunched, and then the one in Republic down in Dundalk. I mean, it closed and then reopened, and it's always been kind of an area of concern whenever we don't have enough ice pads. So if you are inclined and you do want to get involved and you do feel the desire to sign that petition, we will put the link up on our social media channels, and please feel free to follow that link and sign the petition. I don't think there's any really comments needed on that one, guys, unless anybody has anything.
I think you're 100% right. I think we've had a good discussion about development and everything through this episode and also in other ones. But let's be honest, development doesn't mean anything unless there's ice to play on. And the closure of these rinks, and Anthony's been party to even poor management of rinks that are already there, and the facility's been allowed to dilapidate to a point where they're really not safe for anyone to be at, without the investment, without the community investment, without people like the guys in Ayr who are trying to push for this, without the people like Anthony who are pushing for improvements to the rink in Basingstoke. Development is a non-mute point, because we need the ice first and foremost, and that's where we get it from. So yeah, you're 100% right. I will push us on then to the second and last story in period 3. And I just wanted to very quickly chat about this one. The 3 ice season wrapped up last week for its second season. We talked about this tournament last year, about this time last year on the podcast. This is the 3-on-3, if you want to call it professional league that happens in North America. I call it professional because some of the players who are on these rosters are quite interesting to look at. Some names that jumped out to me, guys, Marty and Aaron. Sorry, Anthony, you won't have had the link unless you've been keeping up on 3 Ice. We've a lovely Google document that we fill up as we sort of go through between podcasts. But a couple of names jumped out at me who participated in 3 Ice this season. One, Jeremy Brodeur, formerly of Manchester. John Muse, as well, from the netminder perspective. But even when you started looking at the skaters, there were some really interesting names were starting to come up, including no less than a former Belfast Giant in the form of Bobby Farnham, who I believe was his second season, if you like, taking part in 3-on-3, Three Ice. Sorry. Really interesting competition, guys. Marty, do you have a chance to look through some of the bits and pieces that I put in?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I kind of missed this year in terms of like even coming up. Last year, I think because it was the start of it last year and it kind of launched as a concept last summer. I watched a bit of it online, and I remember us talking about it on the podcast in last August. We talked about the fast pace of it, the change up in relation to things like, you know, the dropping down of the, if the puck hit the net, it just drops down and the continued play. There was all these different rules and regulations, and how when I was watching it last year, just the sheer speed of it and the change of it because of the change, some of those little key, you know, things that would be stoppages in play just don't happen in this three tournament. It is interesting. And again, as you said, names again, those familiar names are popping up again. I think there was last year, there was a couple of other Elite League familiar names popping up. And I think was, did I see as well? I think if I remember correctly, it was Petgrave as well. One of the players' names that was, yeah. So it was a couple of familiar names that around the Elite League were taking part in this competition. If I remember correctly,
well, the one you've missed out on is Eamon McAdam. Eamon McAdam was the playoff MVP and goalie of the year. So something for Guildford to shout about, having bottled the league title.
Didn't see he was in there. He didn't see he was on that list. The one thing I did notice, and the story that did catch my attention from this one, and this was when I knew it was almost because Bobby Farnham put up a post after, I think it was Bobby Farnham. I'm pretty sure it was, because obviously it's Giants related and it's Giants linked. Bobby Farnham volunteered some of the money, if not all of the money, that he earned through this tournament, this three tournament, towards the Blakey. The Giants are doing currently doing a fundraiser for young Blake McCahey, who they're looking to try and raise money to get him and his family over to a Boston Bruins game this coming season. And I think, if I remember correctly, Bobby Farnham put part of the earnings that he got from this tournament towards that campaign. And I think that was one of the first things I realized. Oh, the tournament's on. So I think that should be noted as well. I did want to mention that.
I'm just watching some of the highlights here on the links that you shared, John. I want to see Marty watch a game like this. Anytime I've seen Marty watch any games where it's like 3-on-3, the hoodie's up, the strings are pulled. You know,
do you know my favorite part of it? You're 100% right that Marty wouldn't be able to cope with it. Even better than that, it was 3-on-3 hockey that had to be decided by a shootout.
Yeah, Anthony, the joke here is that the fact that if you are in a rink with me at any point, even if it doesn't seem to be an important game or whatever, as soon as it hits overtime or penalties, either I start looking away, and I do wear mostly a hoodie under my jersey at all times, mostly, so the hood does come up to the point where all the people in the season ticket where we sit in our row in season ticket, the people around us now are very aware of it. So if I walk into the arena and I'm not wearing a hoodie, they're like, we're in trouble today if we get the overtime. So yeah,
the jersey just goes up over the head instead. Three Ice is what it is. Three Ice is what it is. It's a fun knock around. It's like the CHL. Doesn't mean much. It's just there. It's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, that's fired.
Yeah.
When the teams that win the CHL take it seriously, I'll take it seriously. That's my feeling. That's my feeling on the CHL.
Guys, I think that's it. Oh, sorry, John. I think.
Sorry. That is it for period 3. Marty, I noticed there's another couple of things in overtime, but I don't know if you want to cover them or not, or if you think that we've already covered them.
I think we've covered one. I'm just going to put the last question. And Anthony, sorry, this question is very Giants-centric, so I do apologize for that. But it is a question that's coming in from Bevan777 on X. He has asked this question: with the current curtain rising on the 2023-2024 season, he's done less than 48 hours, but we know it's less than that, even more than that. What are your thoughts on the current Giants roster? Is there a player that you're really relieved to see back? And is there a new player that excites you? What new player excites you most? John, let's go with you first. Is there a player that you're glad to see back? And the new players, is there one that you're really excited about seeing?
Right, I'm going to be really obvious I'm going to give you 2 that I'm really glad that are back. First one, Tyler Beskorowany. He wins us trophies. Let's be totally honest. He is lights out the best netminder in the Elite League, and has been every season that he's been in the league. Second one that I'm glad to see back, mostly because I'm just going to run straight away and buy his jersey, Sean Norris. I'm absolutely lights out. I love the fact that he's back with us full time. Player that I am really interested to see. Everything that I've seen about this player, it suggests that he is going to be massively important for us on the forwards, and it's Aaron Nazarian. He looks incredibly fast. If he's paired up with McLeod on a line, I think that has the potential to be a devastating line, a devastating first line against the 9 other teams in the league.
Great. Aaron, same question to you. Player coming back that you're excited to see, a new player that
I'm going to bow out and answer it in a slightly different way. It's similar like I did earlier, because my answers would just be the same as John's. Like, come on, it's going to be Tyler Vascovani and Norris. I haven't looked into as many as the new players as I would like to give it a proper, honest answer. But I'm just going to relate back to the answer that I gave earlier. It's a slightly different twist on it. And I'm just glad that to see Kiefer back as well, to see him try to repeat that success with these new players.
Fair comment. Anthony, you're very welcome to answer the question if you'd like. Is there a player in the Belfast Giants you're glad to see back, and is there a player that you're excited to see from the Belfast Giants?
Kieran Long. Kieran Long is one of my favourite players that I watched over my time watching ice hockey. Multi-trophy winner in Basingstoke as well. We are very, very proud of how well he has done. The plan at the moment is the Coventry doubleheader at the beginning of March. I will see if that comes to. I have the time booked off. I just need to see if it comes to fruition. I'm speaking to some Blaze supporting friends of mine as to whether we're all going as a unit or whether I'll be flying solo for that one. So we will see. But no, Kez is a ledge. Love him to death.
I know you have to go there, Anthony, so you're very welcome to bounce off if you need to there. And that's fine. And I'll just continue on with mine. So Anthony, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you, Anthony.
Breath of fresh air.
Give us a quick before you go. Give us a quick rattle of
no
where
problem
people
at all.
catch you.
Bannersonthewall.wordpress.com is the website. The Twitter is @bannersotw. Banners on the Wall will find me on Facebook, and it will also find me on YouTube. Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. The What's Current stream for everything across the NIHL. It's been a pleasure, gentlemen. We will see you along the way, and at some stage, we'll let really loose about development, or one of these other EIHL podcasts will have the guts to have me on. We'll really have it out.
Let's do it.
We'll see you back on one day, buddy.
Take care,
everybody. Thank you.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye, buddy.
To answer the question, because I haven't answered it yet, for best, for me, which player? For me, I'm really excited. Similar to you, I guess. But Tyler Vascovani is obviously, without a doubt, the one I'm looking forward to. I do own the man a pair of shoes.
I forgot about that.
And in terms of player that I am looking forward to seeing, actually a defenseman, but I think I'm kind of skewed as the reason why I'm kind of excited to see him. I'm excited to see Miles Gendron, I think is how you pronounce it. Mainly because I just found out a really random piece of information, and I think I've seen this on social media. His dog is called Puck, and his dog is in Belfast with him. So he flew into Dublin.
Yes,
he flew into Dublin and he got his dog a passport. And the Giants, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, and someone in the Giants organization can correct us, but I think the Belfast Giants paid for the dog's passport as well. They allowed the dog to travel with him, so the dog is living with him here in Belfast, which I just think is pure dedication.
Are you offering your services as dog walker?
Clearly. Yes, but yeah, no, I think it's fantastic, and I think that's why I've skewed. I think he looks like a great player as well defensively. And we'll see what comes of it.
He's a dog owner. He's clearly a good person, so I want to watch what he's like on the ice. I get it, Marty. That's fine. I get the train of thought there.
Exactly.
You're so damn transparent.
Guys, that is it for this week. I know Anthony has left us, but I do want to say again, it's a massive thank you to Anthony for joining us on the podcast this week. He gave up his time to join us and talk all things NHL. He schooled us on some great stuff, really great insight, really great hockey mind. So we just want to say thank you again for joining us, and we will have him back.
That guy.
Yeah, we will have him back on again for sure in the future.
We've definitely been threatening it for long enough. Yeah, like you said, massive thanks to Anthony for coming on and sticking with us through pretty much the entire recording.
The last thing I want to say was like this week when we had Anthony on this week. If you have a desire and a knowledge base on anything else in relation to hockey, if it's a team, if it's another league, if it's something you want to come on and chat about, give us a shout. We're on social media. Drop us a line. We'd be happy to have a chat with you, especially if you're from another podcast or outlet. We're more than happy to do a bit of collaboration and joined out work, without a doubt. So give us a shout. We'd love to have you on. We're on all of the social media channels: Facebook, X, Trends, if it's still a thing. I did post on it earlier on, but I don't really know if it's still a thing.
Trends, that Facebook one.
Yeah, Instagram one, yeah. And we're at Door 14 Hockey and all of those. Check out this podcast, all of the other podcasts on our website at door14hockey.com. You can check out this stream, which obviously is live right now, but you can watch it back if you want to, or you can watch it for the first time on our YouTube channel, which we will add a link into on all of our socials and also on our podcast. And as usual, you can get our podcast from all of the usual podcast outlets. Whatever that podcast might be of choice. And also don't forget your smart speakers and get them to play Door 14 Hockey podcast. Leave us a comment, like, thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done so already. And yeah, that's it really before this week. So we'll just do our usual and sign off. Hockey tomorrow night, lads. I'm very excited. I'm going to sign off. So John? Oh, hi, Marty.
Oh, it was going so well, and then it was a complete car crash at the end.
It was.
I'm John.
I'm John. Oh man! Just click it. Just end it.
Oh, and he's Aaron. Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.